So, starting off the meeting, we're going to go with item 1, to receive apologies for absence.
We have councillors Coyley, Messent, Pratt and Mortimer.
Right, so we'll be switching to item 2 to note the declarations of members' interests. Okay, good, thank you very much. Item 3 to confirm and sign the minutes of the Public Services Committee meeting held on the 28th of January 2025.
Second.
Seconded. All those go to the minutes of the meeting? Yeah, that's fine. Let's go through, just sign it. Fifth.
Yeah. Four, sorry.
Four.
March 4.
Yeah.
March
Happy
4.
birthday to me. Happy birthday to me.
It's happy birthday.
Yeah, it is. Should have been in London Munich. Who's on it?
21 again?
No.
No, that's the minutes. Birthday.
Yeah, don't even bother. I was supposed to be in Hamburg today, so I was a bit miffed.
Fair enough. Okay, so item number 4, public participation, period not exceeding 50 minutes. Members of the public ask questions, comments related to the budget dinner. Do we have any?
No, Chess. Nonsense.
Thank you very much. Right, item 5, to note the year-to-date financial position for the Public Services Committee.
Well, there's no concerns and no risks. It's been spent. There is an underspend associated with some aspects, but in terms of the capital projects that have been delivered, such as the decorative lighting project at Hall Street, so they've been carried over into the earmark reserve approved by F&G last time. So it'll be delivered in the first quarter of 25/26.
Brilliant. So is there any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose I ought to know the answer to this one, but on here, under town centre, you probably just have to remind me of something. On town centre, on line 4731, public realm, it says the current budget is 25,000 and we've spent 76,000.
Yes. If you look in the right hand column, 64,000 there in the right hand column relates to an earmark reserve associated with funding.
Sorry, which right hand column?
The very right hand column of the line we're talking about.
Oh, yes, yes.
It says 64,000.
Yes.
That's the earmark reserve spend that was spent and granted towards Lyceum Square.
Right.
Okay. So that's accounted for at year end when we close the year down, and then that reconciles that balance.
We'll just put in LY2.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Because I'm just happy to note that.
So yes, let's do anything else.
Right, so then, item 6, to receive an update on progress and consider matters related to the business delivery plans of 24/25.
Okay, the process that we have been for a number of years is the committee decides on how it would like the year to progress in terms of budget delivery, revenue and capital projects to be delivered. The 24/25, we're now at the end of that, obviously being in March, and this gives details where it's got to, lots of greens, a few oranges just to identify what's ongoing. But effectively, aside from the item I spoke about, the capital spend that's going to earmark reserve to be defrayed in the first quarter of 25/26, you've progressed all the projects anticipated. So I understand it. For clarity, the officer associated with this committee, unfortunately, has had a bereavement and so hasn't been available recently. So you've got me as
I'm not sure where it was, Chairman, sorry. I'm not sure where it was, but I did want to ask you a question about the painting of things in the town centre, because I know. Well, yeah, I should have pressed the cover button when I printed it out.
You've got it now.
No, it was just I wanted to know. We've done a lot of painting for the town, for Orbitas as it was in those days.
Yes. In the olden days.
In the olden days, and now that doesn't exist anymore. And there was something on here about painting of town centre. So I just wondered what exactly they were left with to do, because they've done so much.
There isn't a lot left to do, but there
okay.
is always, unfortunately, going back and doing it again to keep it as bright as we can get it.
Okay.
So that
It was only about a year ago, though, wasn't it?
Fortunately, it's used, it gets
Yeah.
a little bit
Oh,
damaged.
right,
People
okay.
chain things to things.
Mm.
So there is a little bit left to do, but
Okay.
it's more topping off than it is a whole
Yeah.
rerun of the
Oh,
thing.
well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Has
that
anything been decided about the area beyond the bus station? People keep asking me what that piece of ground's going to be used for.
Okay, so we're talking about the what was to be the Royal Arcade
Yes,
off Queensway and Victoria Street. That land, Cheshire East is working on a plan to seed that with grass and provide some hard standing and a path across it and fence it and provide effective green, open green space in the town centre for what's titled meanwhile use, which means they have an intention to redevelop it at some point in the future. That is as yet undefined. So I anticipate to be top dressed with topsoil sometime in the spring and seeded, and hopefully we'll see the bright green shoots of growth sometime during the summer.
so if I turn around and say to people that ask me, it's going to be a leisure area for you to sit down and
Open
watch
green
the
space.
grass, watch the grass grow.
Open green space, yeah. They're
Sounds good to
currently
me.
seeking the funding to deliver it. That's not quite been secured yet.
Should be all right in about 8 years then.
Well, we'll see. But they are I know they are. It's not a joke. I know they are working towards trying to get that sorted out. So there is a plan.
Okay.
It's just got to finalise the funding.
Thank you very much.
Have been taking up our suggestion about us adding that layout.
Well, not that I know of. Although more recent designs for the space do include an open, hard standing that may well be suitable for, ball sports and things like that.
They're hoping for a statement during this month, aren't they?
Yeah, at the last town planning meeting, it was discussed and the title spring was given as to when they were going to start.
Some of the timescales are outside their control, such as the funding.
Well, they're going to start with the paving
Yeah,
areas.
the edges need doing,
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah. So that's what they're starting.
I think with the hard stay roots, I think the hard standing's been done a bit later in the year. I think from what I've seen.
I don't see any credit in putting play equipment or anything up there at all.
No, there won't be any play.
No, because in due course, whatever they choose to do will mean shifting that, and then that won't be met well if they've had swings and now they haven't got swings.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that Kev was talking about the discussion we had at planning a while ago on the planning and prior approval, whatever, for the mother that's supposed to be going around Jubilee Gardens or between there. And it was suggested, I can't remember what our response was. I'm hoping it was actually to back his suggestion, which was a much better place for it, in our opinion, was in the wasteland.
The planning committee did respond to that application.
Yeah.
That it held from memory. I think there were 3 comments associated. It felt there's a risk of loss of amenity to the flats adjoining due to potential noise whilst in use, a risk to antisocial behaviour whilst not in use, and that doesn't reflect in any way the operators of the space. That's just the nature of things when it goes dark. And also it was put in that an alternative location may be Royal Arcade, although I'm personally not convinced that would be a feasible option for them at this late stage.
Has it been decided?
It was a planning thing, so it's not usual for the planning authority to reply to a comment or an objection or a statement of support or anything. So we've submitted that. The comments were received and registered on the planning process, and so that's been taken forward in the planning considerations. And so the planning committee's position was reflected in that process. Yes. what comes out of the end, unfortunately, that's the planning process we have to run.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, it's just to watch the report.
Move it, Chair.
Okay.
A lot of things done.
Yes.
And that's the real important thing, the business plan that has been well and truly implemented, hasn't it?
Thank you. Right, so. Item 7. To receive a verbal update from the Crewe Town Council representative member regarding the Queen Rose project.
Right, well, I could read this or I can refer to it, whichever you prefer. I mean, I've done some notes of a meeting of the Greenwich Project Board held at the end of January. I've done a report here with a number of comments. I'm quite happy to speak to it a little bit if you like. There's an introduction to the report. The project's to be relaunched in April. Describe the area that's covered, which most of us are aware of. There's parts through South, through West Ward, and Central and St Barnabas Ward, around the West Street area. And it's worth pointing out the important thing that they'll be supported by 2 full-time waste education officers and 2 full-time community enforcement officers. Those 4 posts being funded by Cheshire East Council, and importantly, a community engagement or project officer that we're funding as the town council. And I think the appointments, well, they'll be underway before too long. I don't know the exact progress of that at the moment, but we certainly have our hopes as to the identity of one of those posts, not just one post, but it would be wrong to say any more than that, I suppose. We were asked to approve project objectives, which we've done. And I was quite surprised. I proposed an addition that there should be a reference to local business. The original proposal put forward by officers didn't include them. And that was in the sort of briefing that Cheshire East had done online, and which actually is contained within the reports that went to the last Public Services Committee. Bit surprised about that. In terms of reference were approved, again with a kind of proviso, which in this case Dawn Clark raised, because it was being suggested that it didn't need to be a quorum for the project board, despite the fact it's got quite a wide membership. But as I thought here, councillors rightly insisted that a quorum for board meetings, at the very least, must include the relevant borough councillors, particularly borough councillors, whenever decisions were to be taken affecting their particular wards. So they actually had a say in that decision. Because at the end of the day, this is classed as a Cheshire East project, and we are, if you like, one of the contributors to that. There was boundaries for the project. We had a meeting, I think, an informal meeting of members of the town council a few weeks ago, where just ideas were suggested and put forward. What came out of that was essentially that the overall project area covers about 4,000 dwellings, or something like that, and the project area was put together by officers using Fix My Street reports. So the areas with the densest report were included. And it was stressed this would be a movable fix. I've not put this in the report, but basically new areas could be added, but other areas of similar size would need to be taken out to compensate. So the overall project area is contained within, let's say, 4,500 houses and dwellings. And I put here is that expected that over time the boundaries will change as problem areas are remedied, which is optimistic, but it makes sense. And you've got a problem area, a hotspot, which then gets sorted. Well, move on to to the next priority. And those details of those changes on those were discussed with Royal Councils at subsequent meetings outside of that project board, when there was more time available for them to go into some of the detail. Staff resources, that's been mentioned, but it was insisted, we did insist as members, that the job specs for the 5 posts needed to ensure that the work was spread out evenly across the 5 officers, and not, and particularly in relation to community engagement, because without community engagement it won't work. Some other comments about enforcement legislation, mobile bring sites, which there'll be more details of that at the March meeting. It's something that was approved in principle by Cheshire Council, but mobile tips in effect. I expect it will be skips and the like positioned at certain locations every so often. Interesting to see what that is. Oh, there's going to be communications and engagement plan from Cheshire East Council, apparently. That will be looked at in some detail at the March meeting of that project board, because the role of the project board is to broadly oversee the implementation and see that it's going in the right direction. And then the final bit, really, at this stage is what we like to call alleyway regeneration. So people who've been involved in the South or previous trial project, will know that it concentrated on the worst, well, what was supposed to be the worst 20 alleyways in the borough, 19 of which were in Crewe South. So that in the regeneration, they discussed changes to boundaries, which are going to be considered further jointly by ANSA and Cheshire East officers, and the final decision on those will be made at the March meeting of this project board, which is in about 2 weeks' time. The other thing was it was a request for each ward council, each borough council, with perhaps a bit of backing from town council, should try and decide or pick up to three alleyways in their ward for priority attention for cleaning up. So in other words, which are the worst alleys in each ward. But it was also pointed out that it will be up to the ward councillors, particularly borough council, but town council probably about it, would need to identify alleyway champions. In other words, people who would back the work that's going on. And a really good example of that is what exists currently in Crewe South, at any rate, with the Friends of Crewe South alleyways. I think there's a couple of those still going. One of them I think still involves former town councillor Gary Palin. I think he was the chairman of that little group of friends. So there were meetings for Crewe South and West. I attended that in Royal Council as the observer, what have you, from the town council. I couldn't go to the one on the 13th. I've got other commitment. But what did come out of that, Crewe South and Crewe West, it lists the alleyways the borough councillors agreed amongst themselves should be considered as priorities. And as far as I can make out, I have inquired, Crewe Central and Crewe St Barnabas, the alleyways consideration are under consideration by Ward Council. It's certainly the case. It's a shame that Councillor Clapcart isn't here, but I did ask him and didn't get a clear answer. But I know that he's consulting online with residents on that, and I'm assuming something similar is happening in Crewe Central. But it's a movable feast anyway. So those proposals will be looked at the March meeting project board, and then all being well be approved. So that's where it's up to. Happy to take any questions or observations or feedback
Can we go to then?
Yeah, the three worst alleyways that people are selecting, do they have to be adopted alleyways or can they be unadopted?
That has not been, that was not specified. Interestingly enough, not specified. But if you look at
You have an answer there, I think.
Full of an answer in that in the past they weren't adopted. So in the pilot program, the alleyways were not adopted anyway. The work took place in unadopted alleyways.
broadly speaking,
Interesting.
the most effective, and that's the problem because out of the 20 worst alleyways, well, the 20 or 19 alleyways in Crewe Southfield, of those 20, we'll call it, I think there was one in Gainsborough Road, which is in West actually, but only about 3 or 4 were actually adopted according to the records. In the past, I've challenged those records because we probably need to something that ought to be challenged again at some point as to the accuracy of those records. I mean, the former county council, I think, did a great trawl of all this 20 or 25 years ago, to all the ancient records and all that sort of thing. And so I find it quite odd because, like where I live, for example, which is the alleyway behind is one of those that's behind Gainsborough Road, and it's in good condition actually, fairly tidy. Not on the list of adopted alleyways, but it must be adopted because the street lights there, and it's not that long ago, a year or two back, that repairs were done to them at no cost to the residents, at least not apart from their rates. When there was a fault. So I suspect that those records are inaccurate, but whether Cheshire East is actually is likely to investigate further is another matter. So yeah, short. I think there was one of those in Crewe South. I think one of them that took off was Chambers Street. I think was probably an adopted alleyway, but there were 3 out of about 20. There's a higher proportion of adopted alleyways than that across the board, though. But no, they don't have to be adopted, largely because the records are so.
That's fine. Yeah.
Councillor.
Cheers. Thanks for your notes, Steve, that I got this evening. So I'll read those out of the Nantwich Road Action Group meeting next week.
Yeah, and I've as you can see, I've cut it down a little bit.
Yeah.
And
So 2 things from that. I think I now understand what mobile green sites are now. They're skips, are they?
Well, it might be. I mean, the proposals are going to come forward. If you look at the papers or whatever documents for the last public services, they were featured within Cheshire East presentations at an earlier stage. I think they're actually targeted at places where they haven't got a local tip. But interestingly, we do have a local tip. But I think Crewe and Macclesfield were sort of identified as areas to have these. I take it to be skips, but I think when there's more detail, I'll report back on whatever comes out of.
And the second thing around the boundaries. So will there be, assuming that the changes to the boundaries are agreed at the next project board meeting, will there be a new map? Or is there, presumably there's an existing map of the area that's covered now?
Yeah, well, those proposals they were included in the presentation that Cheshire East put forward at the draft stage. I think I'll have to check that there's been later versions of those maps that have been put together. I think but in any case, the final changes will be approved at that meeting. I think it's the 19th, fortnight tomorrow, if I remember rightly.
Because, of course, the Smallman Road alleyway is currently outside the boundary.
Well, that was as a put here.
Yeah.
The Smallman Road, that bit will be put in, and there's a chunk being taken out somewhere around Barker Street.
Right.
But it's not all. It's probably it takes out Gapdario, O'Grady, and Barker.
Great. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions? So thank you very much, Councillor.
You're welcome.
Very informative.
I'll endeavour to. It won't be as won't go into that sort of background, but I'll update where those things are to new future meeting. And I think doing this, it's useful to me anyway, and I hope it'll be useful to others. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So just note that.
Just noted, yeah.
Note that. Okay, everyone happy with that? Excellent. Yeah. Right, okay, so on to item 8, to consider the draft committee business delivery plan for 25-26.
So very much like the one you've seen to be completed, this is a fresh one for the current financial year. It was seen in January. It hasn't changed since then. The reason you see it more than once, quite rightly, is in case there's something that's wrong with it, you want to change, move it all around, that's absolutely fine. So you're looking at the same draft business delivery plan, which in essence, if you're still happy with it, or if there's anything you want to check and challenge on it, can then be recommended to council for adoption in the overall business delivery plan. The reason we do this is so we have a direction from day one of the financial year, rather than to come backwards and forwards to various committees and things. The committees have done that, and then you're direct and checking challenges as we go along the process, and those opportunities that come up, you can also inform and fund those as we go. Because not every pound has been spent, because it's proportionate.
Okay. Any questions from comments?
Got one. Relates to excuse me, CCTV, not for the existing service, sort of the one that's covered in the operations headings. Although there is reference to support of additional mobile cameras to support cleaner crew and parks. And I think we have an EMR of about 15,000.
That's right.
Additional. I'm sure somewhere I read, but I can't quite remember where, there was reference to parks. Will this be linked with the Pocket Parks initiative? And I've got in mind particularly to the two pocket parks. They're not part of our funding. No, they're not part of our funding, but part of the town's funding, whichever. Are still to be started Westminster Park and Valley Park. And I'm sure there was a reference on the CCTV somewhere to possibility of CCTV at Westminster.
Okay.
Particularly because of the vandalism that's been rife at the play area. The surface has been ripped up. It's gone on and on. It happens elsewhere too, I'm afraid, but it's certainly gone on there for a long time. The police have been involved, and it does impact also on the adjacent nursery school. And that's where I'll have to declare a non-pecuniary interest as a government there, but they've certainly suffered from that as well. And there has been a certain amount of vandalism affecting the school too. But just wonder what considerations are happening or can be.
I'm more than happy to say those considerations are entirely in your gift. The committee saw that a £15,000 earmark reserve would be added for the coming financial year for the purpose of allocating CCTV units outside of the main central aspects of public ground, such as parks and play areas.
Yeah.
At a future meeting in the coming financial year, you'll be asked to consider which parks you want, or where in the town, let's be absolutely open about it, you want to prioritise. It may well be Westminster Park and other areas, but that's not predetermined by us. We will come to you and say, well, Lindsay will come to you and say, right, we've got this money to spend. You can get X number of cameras for that amount. What's your list of priorities? So that's not determined yet. That's entirely for this meeting to decide. Not tonight necessarily, because I haven't done the research, and Lindsay's the better placed person for that.
Yeah. Well, that's useful to know, because I'm sure that other members of the public. I think there is a reference to parks like Westminster.
Yeah,
mentioned. I'm pretty sure it was included somewhere in a public report.
I'm sure you're right. Your memory rarely fails.
Well, I don't know. Fails me sometimes. But anyway, yeah. Because I did have certainly one or two people who mentioned there was certainly a reference by people at Westminster Nursery to about the chances for CCTV, and I just had to say, well,
It will be for members to direct.
it'll be looked. I'm sure it'll get looked at. Somebody has noticed something about that, an eagle eyed person. Yeah, in fact,
And if I can add to that,
yeah.
the consultation on those two parks starts next week. There's a presentation in the Infantry Road Action Group next Tuesday night. The guy, Eddie Oxall, who's leading that project, has asked me who should be consulted. Or can I suggest people who ought to be consulted? So of course I've said Westminster Nursery, all the schools in the area, never mind obviously the borough and the town councillors. ANSA were meeting with Mark Cotton, I think a week or so ago, to look specifically at the security issues around those two parks. So I'm hoping that as a result of there's plenty of response to the consultation about CCTV and security and so on, that'll have an impact. Depends on the cost, of course.
That's really useful. Thanks for that, because there would be certainly some feedback from from the school or something. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Right. So, just to confirm, we have to go to note for
No, we're after a resolution to recommend to council, please, as part of the corporate business link.
I'll move that, Chair.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Second. All those in favour? Yeah.
So we need to go.
Right. Okay. So, is that correct? I've got 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow. No one's perfect.
Oh, yes.
So in that case, item 10 to note the proposed date of next meeting, Tuesday the 3rd of June